It's the 87th Annual Academy Awards, and the Academy was coming off one of the biggest races in recent years. The big winner for the previous year was looking to be Gravity, which took home a whopping 7 Academy Awards, including Best Director for Alfonso Cuarón, and the movie almost swept. However, the top prize, Best Picture, went to the historical drama 12 Years a Slave, becoming the first film about the African American experience in America to win the top prize. While some critics argued that the Academy likely didn't want the bad PR by giving Gravity the top prize, there was no denying that 12 Years a Slave was an exceptionally moving film, and more than worthy of being crowned Best Picture. Likewise, Disney was finally given their flowers in the Best Animated Feature category, when Frozen took home the gold after winning the hearts of audiences around the world, while also taking home the Oscar for Best Song in a rare case of audiences everywhere actually knowing the Oscar-winning song for the first time in many years. In fact, the songs were so catchy that the following year the Academy decided to make music a central focus of the show and return the Oscar musical numbers to the glory of their former days. This is likely what led them to hiring Neil Patrick Harris as a full-time host. After being part of a few opening numbers in the past, Harris developed a reputation for being a great show host, with him having hosted the Tonys a few times, and with a large background in song and dance on stage, it made sense to have him host the show. He could bring the fun dance numbers that Seth MacFarlane brought a couple years prior, but would have the niceness factor that Ellen DeGeneres did the previous year. Ironically, while animation would show up in the Best Song category again, none of the nominees for Best Animated Feature themselves were musicals. Were some of the snubs musicals, though? As a matter of fact, there were. The first major snub was The Book of Life, a 3D animated musical about a bullfighter who wants to become a musician and win the heart of the woman he loves. Directed with a decided, unique Mexican flair by George R. Gutierrez, the film was a moderate success and received a Golden Globe nomination, but it failed to be nominated by the Academy despite a lot of love from the audiences and critics. Bill Plympton made another Oscar play with Cheatin', a movie that was funded primarily through Kickstarter, the popular crowdfunding website. The movie follows a woman who feels she has met the love of her life, but becomes hateful and vengeful when she discovers the man is cheating on her. This would have made for a cool nomination, but it was likely a bit too quirky for the Academy's tastes. Giovanni's Island, a powerful movie about a Japanese family's unfortunate circumstances after World War II comes to an end, failed to get a nomination despite critical acclaim from critics. Though, in all fairness, the movie didn't get a wide release for many years, before G-Kids finally decided to license it for release in North America in 2023. And at that time, the movie just showed up in film festivals in the cursory 2-week LA theatrical run, so the chances of it actually gaining momentum were pretty slim at the time. Although it had no chance of a nomination, I'm pointing out that The Hero of Color City was shortlisted for Best Animated Feature. As you can see, this is a movie about crayons for kids, and the movie was so unpopular with audiences that Blu-rays of the movie could be found in Dollar Tree stores for years. I'm not even going to bother putting a link to the purchase of the movie on this video, because it's really not worth viewing, or owning, or spending any of your hard-earned money in this tough economy on. Another musical that missed out was Jack and the Cuckoo Clock Heart, a French romantic adventure film based on, and forgive me, I am going to butcher this, Le Manquerie de Coeur. I am so sure I ruined that. My apologies to the French. Which was written by Matthias Malzieu and the concept album by French rock band Dionysos. I am going to get a lot of bad comments on this one. The inspiration of the film was likely lost on the mostly American voting bloc, and so it was passed over for other movies. Arguably, the biggest snub that morning was The Lego Movie. One of the most critically acclaimed movies of the year, and one of the few movies I gave 5 stars to that year, many considered this hilarious romp with a surprisingly touching message to be a shoo-in to not only be nominated, but to win the Oscar. The movie was loved by the Academy on some level, as it did receive a nomination for Best Song for the annoyingly catchy Everything is Awesome. But I think this movie missed Best Animated Feature because too many animators who are still doing the nominees, and I say still doing, we're gonna find out what that means in a video or two, felt that this was basically a glorified toy commercial, and may have been fearful that nominating it for Best Animated Feature would be sending the wrong message to Hollywood and lead to more toy-based projects. While some of them were released, none of them had the same success of the Lego Movie, at least not in animation, and thus a movie with a trademark symbol in the title failed to get an Oscar nomination. DreamWorks missed with two major movies. The first was with Mr. Peabody and Sherman, a feature-length adaptation based on a cartoon segment featured in the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. The movie was directed by the Lion King co-director Rob Minkoff, and the film was liked by critics, but it wasn't loved by them, and audiences were fairly indifferent as the good but not great box office run came to an end, and ultimately put the ice on adapting any more properties from the classic media library that DreamWorks spent roughly $30 to $50 million on a few years prior. The second miss was a huge shock, though, as the breakout stars of the Madagascar franchise finally got their own film with The Penguins of Madagascar. Though, that being said, as Pixar learned with Cars 2, just because a character works in a supporting role doesn't mean they'll work in a feature-length capacity. And it turned out that a little bit of Penguins went a long way, and the characters just were not able to satisfyingly carry a feature-length film to critics' or audiences' satisfaction. And because it's basically a tradition at this point, Disney submitted their latest Tinkerbell movie, titled The Pirate Fairy, for Oscar consideration. Not content to have one subpar submission, they also submitted Planes, Fire and Rescue for Oscar consideration as well, though in all fairness to Planes, at least it had a wide theatrical release, as opposed to the 1 week run at the El Capitan that The Pirate Fairy did. The final snub was Rocks in My Pocket, a Latvian film about the director's family and their struggles with depression and suicidal thoughts. Also submitted for consideration for Best Foreign Language Film, the movie wasn't nominated in either category, but it remains a fascinating use of how animation can be used to tell personal stories that can connect to a wider audience. But with those snubs out of the way, what were the films that got into the race? Starting off, Disney was back in the race again with Big Hero 6. Based on the Marvel comic book series of the same name, it was one of the first times Disney mined Marvel comic books for material to make into a movie. The film was praised for its likable characters and inventive action sequences, but many felt that the story was a bit on the predictable side, and their inclusion over many of the snubs was considered a surprise by many. It was believed that the nomination would be the film's reward. Laika was back in the race again with The Box, arguably the studio's most charming and family-friendly film they produced, except for the fact that the box trolls themselves were kind of weird-looking creatures who lived in boxes. Yeah, even at their most family-friendly, Laika movies were a bit on the weird side. The Box Trolls wasn't their most critically acclaimed film, but it did get in due to its unique nature, animation style, and a little bit of heart, even though the movie was overall a little strange. DreamWorks was in the race again with How to Train Your Dragon 2, the sequel to the highly acclaimed How to Train Your Dragon, which you may remember probably came pretty close to winning in this category a few years ago. With a stronger script and darker tone, the sequel was hailed as one of DreamWorks' best sequels, and having not won this award since Shrek won the inaugural year, many felt that maybe it was time for DreamWorks to finally win another one. Cartoon Saloon's Song of the Sea was considered the surprise nominee, at least to those outside the animation industry. From director Tom Moore, the guy who crashed the party several years ago with The Secret of the Kells, Song of the Sea tells the story of a young boy looking for his mute sister, who disappears into the night under mysterious circumstances. Maintaining the lush 2D animation that was likely a draw to the studio's first film, Moore's follow-up film was arguably more magical and more visually spellbinding, and a surprise win would not have surprised anyone. See what I did there? Rounding out the nominees was The Tale of the Princess Kaguya. Directed by Isao Takahata, who hadn't directed a movie in years, The Tale of the Princess Kaguya was Takahata's interpretation of the famous Japanese literary story, The Tale of the Bamboo Cutter. Animated with a unique form of traditional animation that gave off the look of pencil sketches and coloring, The Tale of the Princess Kaguya was lauded as being one of the best films from Studio Ghibli. And not only could the themes of aging and broken dreams be appreciated by older Academy members, it would be a great opportunity to give one of the masters of animation an Academy Award, and many considered it the runner to win. But would it? The race, once again, was on. After the memorable opening number, one of the best in Oscars history if you were to ask me, it was time to hand out awards, with Lupito Nyong'o handing out the first award, Best Supporting Actor, to J.K. Simmons for his monstrous role in Whiplash. A performance I would argue is a lead performance, not supporting, but whatever. That's for another video someday. If you want to see it, comment below. Then Jared Leto presented the award for Best Supporting Actress, which went to Patricia Arquette for Boyhood, who used her time to champion equal pay for women in the industry in a fiery and very memorable speech. At this point, Ansel Elgort and Chloe Grace Moretz were up to give out the Oscar for Best Visual Effects, which went to Christopher Nolan's mind-bending classic Interstellar. Next up was Eddie Murphy making a surprise appearance to give out the award for Best Original Screenplay, which went to Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance, which would be the first of several major awards the film would win that night. Julie Andrews then came on stage to appropriately give out the award for Best Score, which went to Alexander Desplat for The Grand Budapest Hotel. Desplat was nominated twice tonight, his second nomination being for The Imitation Game, and his win was a long overdue and deserved win for creating memorable scores for many years in the industry. Oprah Winfrey was next to give out the award for Best Adapted Screenplay, which went to The Imitation Game, which would be the film's sole Oscar win of the 8 nominations it received. Sienna Miller and Chris Evans came on stage to hand out the Sound Awards, with Best Sound Mixing going to Whiplash and Best Sound Editing going to Clint Eastwood's American Sniper. Felicity Jones and Chris Pratt came on stage to present the award for Best Production Design, which went to The Grand Budapest Hotel. Then Idina Menzel and John Travolta came on stage to not only poke fun at the fact that Travolta mispronounced Idina Menzel's name the previous year, but to give out the award for Best Song. And while I'm sure fans of the Lego Movie want me to say that Everything is Awesome won this category, the award went to Glory for Selma, of which John Stevens and Lonnie Lynn gave a passionate political speech on racism in America. Reese Witherspoon then came on stage to give out the award for Best Makeup and Hairstyling, which went to The Grand Budapest Hotel. In case you haven't figured it out, The Grand Budapest Hotel was having a pretty good night. Kerry Washington and Jason Bateman came up to give the award for Best Live Action Short, which went to The Phone Call, an excellent movie about a woman trying to talk a man out of committing suicide. They then went on to present the award for Best Documentary Short, which went to the harrowing Crisis Hotline Veterans Press 1. The next award was not Best Animated Short Film, surprisingly, but Best Editing, which was presented by Benedict Cumberbatch and Naomi Watts, who handed it to Whiplash. Jennifer Aniston and David Oyelowo, and I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that, I have a stutter and that name's a tongue twister, took over presenting duties for Best Documentary Feature, which went to Citizen 4. Idris Elba and Jessica Chastain, God, this show has beautiful presenters, handed out Best Cinematography to Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. Then Jennifer Lopez and Chris Pine, the third Chris of the night, presented Best Costume Design to The Grand Budapest Hotel. Finally, it was time to get to the animation categories, with Anna Kendrick and Kevin Hart presenting the award for Best Animated Short Film, which went to Disney's Feast. And by the way, that short can be seen on the Big Hero 6 DVD and Blu-ray. Finally, it was time for Zoe Saldana and Dwayne Johnson to present Best Animated Feature. And this is actually the first time Johnson would present this award. His speech would show why he is probably the best person who has ever presented the Best Animated Feature award.
I remember crying my eyes out when I watched the end of The Lion King.
How old were you?
Not important?
Wait, you were like 20 years old, right?
Let's just all move on. Thank you, Zoe.
Okay.
The fact is, these movies made us feel with paint and pixels and often years of incredible hard work and effort. It is no surprise that animation is Hollywood's most successful and innovative genre.
They then opened the envelope to announce the winner.
The Oscar goes to... The honors, my lovely lady.
Thank you. Big Hero 6! Don Hall, Chris Williams, and Roy Conley.
And Disney's Big Hero 6 shocked everyone by winning Disney their second consecutive Oscar in this category, over movies that were considered much more likely to win. So let's go on screen for the first time in this entire series, and let me make a confession of some sort. This is by far the hardest script to write for this series because I'm not gonna lie, I fully believe that this should not happen. There is no reason Big Hero 6 should have been the winner in this category in this year. I'm not saying it's a bad movie, but when you look at the competition, everything, I really had to scratch my head and think long and hard about why this would happen. And while I am presenting some reasons why I believe it happened, this was such an inexplicable win that this is probably going to be the most speculative the reasoning for the result of the award has ever been in this series. And I just have to be upfront about that because I'm not 100% comfortable that these are the reasons Big Hero 6 won. It's just the only thing I could really think of considering everything else that the movie really had going against it. So let's enter the reasons, but keep in mind they are far more speculative than what they usually are. Reason number 1. Reigning champion advantage. While Disney didn't have an overdue narrative this time around, they did have the reigning champion advantage, meaning that because they won the previous year, it meant more people were going to look at their follow-up project. And while Big Hero 6 is not nearly as good as Frozen is, it is a well-made, enjoyable movie that families could enjoy. Number 2, Isao Takahata is not as well known to Academy voters as Hayao Miyazaki. While Studio Ghibli is world respected and Isao Takahata was one of animation's greatest filmmakers, he was still not as well known as his partner Hayao Miyazaki. Isao Takahata directed fewer films for Ghibli, but arguably made more impactful ones. These movies included Pompoko, My Neighbor the Yamadas, and Grave of the Fireflies, which is one of the greatest movies ever made. Yet these are not exactly family-friendly movies, and even Grave of the Fireflies, despite its popularity, was relatively unknown to most Academy members. While the Academy should ideally be purely about the work, it is a club of sorts, and being someone known in the club is a huge advantage to have. Isao Takahata was simply not known to many members in the club, which likely resulted in not only less urgency to reward him, but also less urgency to watch the movie, and we'll elaborate on that point more in a minute. Number 3, Marvel was on top of the world. Though it wasn't advertised much in the marketing material, Big Hero 6 was an adaptation of a Marvel comic book and was therefore produced as such, all the way down to the fact that Stan Lee even had a cameo appearance near the end of the film to set up more adventures for the group of heroes. Since Marvel was on top of the world but not winning awards, there were likely some Academy members who felt that this would be a great opportunity to give the world's biggest studio an Oscar in a category that would not raise eyebrows. Though it should be noted, Marvel Studios does not acknowledge this win, seeing that while the movie was based on a Marvel property, the studio itself had little to do with its creation. Number 4, kids factoring into the voting. While this was probably always a thing, this was one of the first years where Academy voters openly admitted that they let their kids choose which movie to vote for in this category. To some voters, Best Animated Feature is a kids' award, and thus they just ask their kids or grandkids which movie was their favorite. There is even one anonymous voter who said he watched all 3 movies, but voted for Big Hero 6 because his kids watched it 3 times, and what did that tell you? Personally, I think that says kids like movies with a lot of colors and action scenes and aren't intelligent enough to vote on high art, but whatever, I'm not a voting member of the Academy.
Yeah, he's a kid. Kids are stupid.
Either way, this revelation actually added some other elements that would put Big Hero 6 at a surprising advantage, and since we're on the topic of kids, number 5, How to Train Your Dragon 2 was too dark. While the first How to Train Your Dragon was lauded as being an excellent family film, it did have a bit of a bite to it, particularly when it came to the end. How to Train Your Dragon 2 continued to bring the series into a more mature direction and was dark enough that it was more of a movie for older kids and teens rather than young kids. With some tragedy thrown into the mix, what might have been a surefire win for DreamWorks ended up not gaining traction because kids, frankly, were more disturbed. Yes, Big Hero 6 also contains a death. But the death scene in How to Train Your Dragon 2 not only happened to a well-established character, but was done in a way that forced kids to think differently about one of the main protagonists. If voters were leaning on their kids to make the choice this year, it makes sense that kids might have been more receptive to Big Hero 6, which was largely a fun adventure, compared to How to Train Your Dragon 2, which leaned more into the tragedy and drama of the story. Number 6, disdain for international films growing. While Spirited Away may have won the sophomore trophy for Best Animated Feature, people were noticing that the Academy was more slanted towards awarding American films over international productions. For whatever reason, that may have been intentional, as anonymous voters admitted to not liking many international nominated films, with one voter even calling The Tale of the Princess Kaguya some thing made in China, a comment this person was wrong about on so many levels. This may explain one of the reasons why an average American film overtook better international features. Of course, there is the final reason. Reason number 7, voters didn't watch all the nominated films. Now, this is not new. In fact, it is an open secret that Academy voters do not have the time to watch everything that is nominated. Stop, hold your tongue with your Academy members have one job to do nonsense, because that is not true. Many Academy members are working people with full-time jobs, with only a little time between nomination morning and the final voting deadline to cast their ballots. While the Academy does require members to get a punch card of some sort punched before they can vote on the shorts, because they're, short, so it's easy to require viewings of those, voting is done on the honor system. And speaking as someone who has written a few books where I review every Oscar-nominated movie of a particular year, I can testify that watching everything that is nominated is a tall task, and I've never seen absolutely everything before the Oscar telecast, much less before the voting deadline comes in. I'm not saying this is right, I'm just saying it's a reality. Where that comes to bite this year in the butt is that when you factor in that voters largely leaned on their kids, didn't understand the international productions, and possibly skipped them altogether, it makes a lot more sense how a good but far from great movie like Big Hero 6 can walk away with a win when there are clearly much better films in the race. In the end, it was an absolute shocker of a win. One that I personally feel is the least exciting winner for Best Animated Feature thus far. And again, no shade to the filmmakers, because on its own, Big Hero 6 is a good movie. It just wasn't great like a few of the other options were. But hey, there was always next year, which would prove to be anything but ordinary. While Aardman would be back in the race with a Wallace and Gromit spin-off film, the films are all different shades of strange, including the first Kickstarter-funded nominee in the category, a new drama from Studio Ghibli, a silent film from Brazil, and even Pixar was going to return with their most unusual concept to date. I'll see you all next time. Hey, you made it to the end. Thank you so much for making it to the end. Just a few more things. First of all, the names that you see on the screen, these are our Patreon and YouTube member supporters, and I thank each and every one of them. Their support helps me make exclusive videos for Patreon and YouTube members, as well as keep the channel running, and of course is just of huge kindness to me. Also, don't forget to check out the iCritic-led podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, Deezer, whatever podcasting service you listen to, it is there. We definitely want to see you there. And hey, there's also other videos that you can check out. So, check out these other channels, these other videos, especially that one. I think that's a really good one.